right, I'm here at Baywick Island. There's actually another sailboat anchored maybe off to the other side. Maybe it's down this side, I'm not sure. Anyways, there is one more, so I'm not the only one at this anchorage. I tried another anchorage on the way. The name escapes me at the moment, but I couldn't find depths under 30 feet, and so this I found, I anchored at 15-foot depth, so I don't have to haul up as much chain. If I put out 30-foot depths, if I anchor in 30-foot depths, then I have to haul up 180-foot chain. If I anchor in 15-foot depths, I only have to do 90. So we got about 100 maybe out right now. So that's much preferable. But you know, it was spotty here. It was like, you know, mostly 40, and then there are spots where it goes down relatively quickly below 20 and down to 15. First time I anchored it, I had to pull it up because I drifted back into 40-foot depths. I actually put the motor in forward the second time so I could make sure I wasn't going to blow out of the depths I wanted to be in as fast. You know, when I left Cairns, it was like 500 miles to Horn / Thursday Island. So Horn is the airport, and then probably where you want to anchor, and then Thursday Island is where you need to take care of the stuff with the agriculture department. They want to check for fruit flies, you know, it's just a really, really desolate stretch. There you can see the sailboat in the distance, but I didn't see a lot of boats today. Mostly we're going to see work boats. At the previous anchorage there was a sailboat anchored, but it's kind of a one-way trip because the winds are so strong. They're about 25 knots. They don't really ever slow down from that. You might have a day or two that's below 25, below 20, but for the most part it's just one way. We go up to the top of the York Peninsula, which is good. That's the direction we're going in. You know, obviously if the winds were adverse this way, we would think of a different route, but thankfully it is blowing us up to where we want to go. But you know, now we got about 300 miles to go, so depending on the math, 50 miles a day, that's 6 days. 60 miles a day, that's 5 days. 40 miles a day, that's 8 days. You know, 30 miles a day, that's 10 days, right? I don't think we're going to do 30 miles a day because there just are not good anchorages every 30 miles. So tomorrow I think it's going to be a 50-mile day. We're going to go past Cape Melville and anchor at one of those islands. I think it's called Stokes Bay, which is about 15-20 miles from Cape Melville, which is the thumb. So you've got the York Peninsula. It's got a thumb, like my thumb there, and that's Cape Melville. And then you're just basically going straight north, and it gets really narrow after you get past Cape Melville and the bay there. I think it's Queen Elizabeth or Elizabeth Bay, something like that. Once you get past that big bay there, it's straight up. The barrier reef is very narrow, right? So, and there's not a lot of good anchorages. They're kind of like 60 miles apart for kind of a marginal anchorage. So it's conceivable so today's Saturday, after Sunday should be a good anchorage. After that, it's conceivable the anchorages you get, number one, you start before dawn, picking up the chain. Let's say you leave at first light, you get into your anchorage 60 miles north, which is very doable in these winds because the boat, you don't have to put up much sail to get 6 knots. But you know, I think the next couple anchorages after Stokes Bay are not they're pretty marginal. They don't look great, so they may not work out. And so if they don't work out, you don't really have a plan B if you've gone 60 miles in daylight. So it's possible we'll do some night sailing. So it might, right now, and if we don't have any more major repairs to do, so far things have been going pretty good, knock on fiberglass, then it's conceivable we could be in there in 6 days, it's because there's just not a lot of options, right? And so averaging 50 miles a day is probably not unreasonable. So I which is good because we've got limited charging capability, right? I think, if I rely on the engine to charge the batteries, then we'll be fine. But in terms of gasoline, we got limited, we've got maybe 8 days, 9 days, something of gasoline to charge the batteries using the Honda generator. But if we use the diesel, but the diesel is just kind of very inefficient and smelly and noisy, and then you put hours on the diesel engine. So I try to avoid using the diesel to charge the batteries if I can. And of course we took out the solar panels are not working, and they never put out that much anyways. And we took out the wind generator because it was broken. So that's the other good thing. When we get there, we can throw away the old wind generator. We don't have to carry it around. So it's going good, I think. I think Jana looked at Windy for me, and that was just basically what I'd seen on Windy last time I had internet, which is in Cookstown, which was 3 days ago. That there's going to be most days are going to be like orange, 25 knots, 20 to 30 knots. My spot forecasts say that they're less than that, but I think the Windy seems more in line with what the winds feel like, and the fact that we're making 6 to 7 knots on a stay sail and a third reef kind of tells me that it's not 20 knots, it's closer to 25 or more. So it's just a desolate stretch where there's no human being settlements anywhere, right? So there may be some aboriginal small scattered settlements, but there's not paved roads, there's not towns until we get to the Torres Strait. Subscribe. Cape Melville. Alright, so with the anchor problems of getting it up, we were really delayed, so we weren't able to get to Stanley Island. We maybe could get in there around 6-ish, but I think that's kind of cutting it fine, especially if Cape Melville, I think it's called Bathurst Bay, on the other side of Cape Melville is such a good anchorage. So I'm inclined to try that. We're going to try the inside route between the two rocks, not in the ship's channel, because if the ships come around the corner, I don't think we have a lot of room to maneuver. Also, it would just be like a motor dead into the seas if we took the channel and then made a south turn. So I think it's better to go around the corner, then you're at least in the lee of the land, and then the motoring should be a lot easier into the anchorage. But we should be able to sail between the boulders and then or the rocks, and then we should be then we'll need to motor, or won't need probably. The motor's working, we'll motor. I can't believe this is the same day that I was, in these 30 knot gusts, putting on the new Danforth style aluminum anchor. I think they call it a Guardian 37 for a much bigger boat. Like our Mantus anchor was made for a bigger boat, but you know, our Mantus anchor was I guess, what do they call it, the stock or something, the part that is attached to the chain and then goes to the flukes. It got bent on a rock, and you know, we were just getting pummeled there on Cape Melville. But as soon as I left Cape Melville, the winds really just dropped down. I mean, maybe they're 10 to 15 now. They were about 10 for a good bit of this sail. I thought I was going to just gallop all the way to the other island. I think, let's see what it is here. I think it's, I want to say it's Stanley Island and Stokes Bay. Yeah, so Stanley Island lives in Stokes Bay, but I don't have enough time because I got such a late start. I was also working on the autopilot as well as fixing the anchor situation. The great thing about the Mantus and also the Guardian is you can take it apart and stow them, and so I stowed the Mantus. Hopefully we're gonna get warranty service for that and be able to just get the part that was bent. We don't want the full anchor, we just want the part that was bent, because it just wouldn't set right then. But I think I just looked at the weather forecast, although my wife is warning me the windy is showing orange forever. I just looked at the 3-day weather forecast, and it looks like it's, you know, might be less than 20 knots or 20 knots and below for the rest of the passage. I was planning on doing it overnight, so I might need to leave earlier in the overnight to have a chance to get to the good anchorage. Otherwise, it may be like an overnight. I don't know. We're cutting it closer than I would have liked to do for this, than I would have liked to do for an anchoring. But I just was so sick of being at Cape Melville. I couldn't. I just like, okay, we gotta go. And it looked like we were gonna make it. Like, I started picking up at 1:20, even though it took me almost an hour to pick up the chain. But I think at the end, it kind of, the winds just lightened up just a little bit, and that made it easier to pick up the anchor. So the challenge has been just picking up the anchor in these winds more than anything. But they also posed some problems on our first day out of Cookstown too. Subscribe. All right, so we are anchored here in the Owen Channel. I think in the Flinders group. I think that's Flinders is the island that I'm right next to, and it seems like the catamaran that was anchored next to us yesterday anchored here first. They left before I did. This is a kind of anchorage. It has the same problem of everything else, is that there's very few depths, and so you just have to chart the place yourself. So I went to the other side of the sand spit because I thought that would have the least amount of swell, even though most of the anchorage recommendations are where the catamaran is. Although I figured if I was down from the catamaran, I would get quite a bit of swell, so I don't know how many boats can get there without swell. But the issue is that there's this sand spit, which you can see, and at low tide it goes out further. But it also, there's a lot of really low ground. So it goes from 30 feet to 20 feet to 10 feet and then 5 feet. So I was like motoring around in 5 feet at mid tide. So actually it would be like 3 feet. So had it been low tide, I would have ran aground conceivably, although I think I might have seen it in the water. The first time I dropped, I was floating in 6 foot water, and it was like the tidal difference was like 7 feet, and so we were mid-tide, so it was going to go down 3 feet, so we've got a 4-foot keel, so we would have been on our side or standing on our keel, one or the other. I think we were like launched on our keel but barely in Venice, and it was fairly comfortable. There was no movement, and we just settled right down in the mud there. But I didn't want to do that. I also didn't want to drag into the sand spit. So if for whatever reason I was already putting it, it was showing me like where the sand spit is. The sand spit is mismarked on the Garmin charts. It's further to the west. Yeah, it's further to the west than what the charts say. The charts have it too far east. But because I motored over what was supposedly the sand spit. But I wanted some more depth, so I went past the mark. There's the 7-foot depth mark, 6.9 depth mark, and I went like 120 feet past it, then dropped the hook, so I could swing into that, which I knew that depth was going to be okay. Whereas if you drop at the 7-foot depth that's marked on the chart, then it won't be. You might run aground at some point, depending on the tidal stage.